Hey folks, welcome yet again to Israel Explained. Even though we just talked yesterday, there's just so much stuff that I really want to keep on top of. So let's do it again today. Um, we have a lot more information now about the Hamas offer, so we'll talk about that. Yesterday there was a dramatic Israeli operation taking over the Rafah Crossing. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the very elusive and tricky American policy towards all this, over which there's been some misconceptions. So let's jump right in. Um, we now have all the details of the Hamas offer. It's actually been published in full. And we also know what Israel has accepted before. So it's pretty easy for us to make a comparison between what Israel has shown that it's been willing to accept and what Hamas has shown that it's been willing to accept. And the truth is, once you look at all the details, the gaps are quite massive. And it's easy to understand why the Israeli cabinet immediately rejected what Hamas said and also authorized the operation in Rafah. So let's look at the details. Um, Israel wants 33 humanitarian hostages released in the first phase. Hamas has said that they're willing to release 18 hostages and that the rest of the 33, will be either dead or alive, heavily implying that the rest are not alive. Israel wants 3 hostages released per day to get it over with quickly. Hamas 3 per week to drag it out as much as possible. Israel wants 20 prisoners for every humanitarian hostage and 40 heavy prisoners for every female IDF soldier. Meanwhile, Hamas wants 30 prisoners for every humanitarian hostage and 50 for every IDF female soldier. This is a big one that Israel is livid about. Israel wants a veto on the identity of any prisoners released so that the heaviest prisoners that they believe are the worst risk for reoffending will not be released. Hamas is saying that Israel should get no say whatsoever on who the individuals will be. Israel wants only civilians to return to the north. Hamas wants everyone to be able to return to the north, including armed terrorists, Hamas battalions, and so on and so forth. Israel is insisting no declaration on the end of the war. Hamas is insisting declaration of ending the war in the first phase of the ceasefire. It's very hard to see how this gap is bridged. The differences are too significant. The deal that Hamas is offering would allow Hamas to take over the north again. Israel would withdraw. The war would end. Prisoners that are very high risk would be released. It would be a major defeat for Israel, something that it's not ready to accept, at least not yet. Now, the response that Israel had yesterday militarily was a very good one. So, what I've heard is that Israel had strong intelligence that Hamas was about to pull the deal that it was going to pull. I don't know where they got that from, possibly from Qatar, but they knew in advance. Therefore, they were already planning a military response. That military response was to take over the Rafah Crossing, but very successfully, they managed to blur what that operation would be. See, Israel picked to ask people to empty out an area that had several possible targets in it, including a lot of the Hamas brigades that occupy Rafah. But instead of going after the brigades, and instead of going after the eastern side of the Rafah city, which a lot of people were expecting them to do, they went towards the Rafah crossing itself. Rafah Crossing, of course, is a place not only of immense symbolic significance, but also immense strategic significance. It's the main lifeline for Gaza traditionally, between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. That's where weapons have come in traditionally. That's where refugees leave or people come in. That's where, in the past, before the war, most wares came in from. A lot of humanitarian aid comes in through there as well. And by taking that, Israel has taken over all the areas of distribution of humanitarian aid. It's also very symbolic. There's no equivalent in most countries. Israel has an equivalent. It's the Ben Gurion Airport. You know, like a center of gravity where you enter and leave the country. That's their equivalent, the Rafah crossing. So that's a big deal. They also took over a lot of the Philadelphia corridor. Now, the Philadelphia corridor is the border between Egypt and Israel, and underneath it, there are believed to be many tunnels. Now that Israel controls that area, it could at least theoretically do a lot more to take out the tunnels underneath. It could do a lot more to make sure that arms are not coming in general. And they did all this with no casualties at all, killing 20 terrorists. There was an attempt at an IED, a booby-trapped vehicle. Israel dismantled it. So it was a massive success. And it helps with morale in Israel, but it also helps depress the people in Gaza and Hamas operatives. Just the other day, they thought that there was going to be a ceasefire. Now they've lost the Rafah Crossing. It's a good way of showing that Israel is not going to take Hamas's escalating demands lying down and is willing to apply military pressure. Now, in order to understand this operation, we also need to understand the American role in it. So it appears that when Biden and Netanyahu had a talk on the phone a couple of days ago, Biden gave the green light, not just the yellow light. I said yellow light yesterday, but it appears he gave a green light to this operation. So the U.S. supports this operation because it's a limited one. But meanwhile, the United States has some leverage over Israel, as has appeared in several media reports, most notably in the Wall Street Journal. The United States is putting a hold on several arms deliveries. Um, so that includes 6,500 Joint Direct Attack munitions. Those are kits that enable unguided bombs to be steered to a target. That sale was supposed to go through in January. In order for the sale to go through, the Biden administration has to notify Congress. They haven't notified Congress. So they're putting up a bureaucratic obstacle intentionally on that. March deal worth 1 billion in weapon deals for Israel that include tank ammunition, military vehicles, and mortar rounds have also been delayed similarly. The Biden administration does not believe that Israel needs these arms desperately right now, but is instead using them to send a message that if they escalate in Rafah in a way that the United States finds unhelpful for reaching a ceasefire, then there will be further delays. But if Israel keeps to a limited attack, there will be release on these delays. This is very similar to what we saw the United States do in 1973 when Israel started crossing the Suez Canal. Um, so, an Israeli source told NBC that this is a quote, limited operation intended to achieve tactical military goals and put pressure on Hamas during negotiations. That has received the support of the Biden administration. Meanwhile, Biden is also signaling to Israel, giving them inducements, carrots. For example, the Biden administration had said that they're going to release a report on whether Israel is fulfilling international humanitarian law or not, at the request of several American senators. Today, Politico revealed that that report has been delayed indefinitely. So that's an attempt to um, show support for this operation, but also a form of leverage. If Israel escalates this operation more than it has, that report might be released. Further holds might be. So, what the U.S. is trying to do is it's trying to support this operation in as much as they believe that it is pressuring Hamas into making a deal. They're also reportedly pressuring Qatar into throwing out Hamas from the country, um, but also wanting to make sure that Israel doesn't escalate unduly. So the U.S. is walking a tightrope here. And currently, they support this operation, but Israel is also playing this very smart. The way Israel's designed this operation right now is it's having a rolling escalation. It took over the Rafah Crossing, which is a big strategic coup. Now it's clearing out Rafah, and there's videos of thousands of people leaving the city. putting up tent cities in the Al Mawasi, etc. All this satisfies a lot of the Biden administration's demands regarding refugees and will allow it to escalate to some extent with American approval. So Israel is going to be walking hand in hand with the United States on this. And just the threat that they can escalate at any time into Rafah will help put pressure on Hamas in these negotiations. So everything is linked. American position, the ceasefire negotiations, and the Israeli rolling operation. Ultimately, this operation is not intended to defeat Hamas. It won't defeat Hamas, but to put pressure on them to make a deal that's more beneficial to Israel. And we'll be watching this very closely. Since I just released this video yesterday, I only had two questions, but they're good ones. JDB316 asks, how badly have U.S.-Israel relations been damaged by the Biden administration's response to Israel's actions in Gaza? Might Netanyahu go so far as to campaign with Trump in swing state areas with a lot of Jewish voters, such as suburban Philadelphia? So, regarding the amount of damage done to U.S.-Israel relations, I think U.S.-Israel relations are actually, this is going to surprise people, quite robust. I don't think there's been that much damage. There's a lot of distrust right now because the United States is trying to pressure Israel into making a ceasefire. But I think the Israeli officials understand why they're doing that, and vice versa. There's a lot of frustration in the United States over how Israel um, is operating in Gaza, but they also understand to some extent that Hamas is a genocidal, maniacal terrorist organization that needs to be destroyed. So they have differences of opinion, but a certain understanding of why they're doing these things. A lot of the worst frustrations are, as you pointed out, between Biden specifically and Netanyahu specifically. They don't trust each other's political motives, especially Biden doesn't trust Netanyahu. But that's not the same as a deep rift in U.S.-Israel relations, which I'm not seeing yet. As for Netanyahu campaigning with Trump, that would never happen. I think, in fact, you might see Netanyahu be pretty reserved, assuming he's still in power during the elections in the United States, pretty reserved about supporting Trump. Sure, he'll want Trump to win, but considering how much support Biden is giving Israel in this war, and considering how much criticism he would get if he damaged U.S. Israel relations significantly during the elections, I think he would fool it and maybe actually not be as clearly pro Trump as he was pro Romney against Obama. Also, Trump doesn't seem to be a big fan of Netanyahu's and has said all sorts of mean things about him recently. So I really don't see that happening. FRDZ4KB said, taking the Rafah Crossing seems to be the first smart thing Israel has done in a while. Copy that. But now they own 100% of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It seems to me Hamas has the capabilities to cause serious trouble on that front. I don't think Israel has any margin of error for that on the international politics theater of this war. I think it is deal time, to be honest, with the improved leverage because I don't see a realistic path to dislodge Hamas. As long as Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have a veto, while there seems to be alternative political support for the deal. Yeah, so I totally agree with you. It's very tempting to look at this success in Rafah and say, "Oh, we're back, baby. The IDF is now going to whoop Hamas." But I don't really see that happening. Israel doesn't have enough diplomatic support from the world, from the United States, to do any of that. If Israel tries to do that, which I'm not even sure Netanyahu wants to, but assuming that he would, it would end up with a rift with the United States, sanctions, probably in the Security Council, and ICC and ICJ rulings against Israel. I don't think Netanyahu wants to do that. I don't think the Israeli government wants to do that. So I think what they're trying to do is get some leverage to get a better deal, maybe somewhere between the Israeli offer and the Hamas offer. That's achievable, but unfortunately, not much more than that seems achievable to me. Let's not get caught up in euphoria because there was a good military operation, and it was a great military operation, and I was filled with pride to see it. Okay, so that's the video for today. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media and following my history podcast, History of the Land of Israel podcast, where we're talking about the first monarchy in ancient Israel. So I will see you here next time something interesting happens, which will be probably very soon.